These changes impact the face of politics and society here. We have with us Mr. Cheong, Seng, the chairman of AIMS, and Mr. Gerald Giam, a blogger and a writer for The Online Citizen, who took part in the consultation process for AIMS. Welcome to the program. Now, Mr. Cheong, let me just ask you first. Of the 9 which were not accepted by the government, were you surprised by these, and which of those do you feel more strongly about?
I'm not surprised by the rejection, because you've got to bear in mind that they constitute only a third of the total recommendations, and those that were accepted were really the major recommendations that were made. I believe that the major recommendations will broaden the space for political discourse in Singapore, and the rejection, to me, is a reflection of the government's caution in how fast it wants to move in using new media as a platform for political discourse.
You kind of represent the new media, right? You work with the Online Citizen. You still write for the Online Citizen. You were also part of the consultation process, right? How do you feel? I mean, do you feel that were you surprised, upset, disappointed?
Well, I think if we will take the whole process from the start of the consultation, when it first came out, a lot of us bloggers were very concerned that the committee was going to recommend a further restriction of the current regulations. So we're quite glad that when it came out, they were actually recommending some liberalizations. And I think there was already a foreshadowing of what's going on during TM's National Day rally speech, but he did mention that there's going to be a liberalization of the Films Act and some of that. So I don't think there are any big surprises, although I am personally a bit disappointed that they have not taken up some of the suggestions from AIMS.
Which of these 9 are you, which ones?
Well, I think there was one recommendation from AIMS to engage online media more on their turf, instead of using their own portals like Reach, which is a feedback portal, to gather feedback, but rather go out on the field, like the online field, and respond to online postings. They have rejected that. They said that there's too many postings for them to respond to.
But can I just ask what might be a fundamental question, but why do you want government to respond to your points of view? Because won't it be seen as a kiss of death?
I don't think it's a kiss of death. I think it depends on, you see, there's a tendency to classify all bloggers as one monolithic entity, that they're all the same, they're all anti-government. It's not true. I mean, there are PAP bloggers even, and there are those who are pushing the government's standpoint. But I think by and large, the bloggers who are blogging about social political issues do want some sort of response. I mean, it's a simple analogy. Is if I'm talking to you and you just ignore me, then how do I feel?
But you're part of this engagement process now. Do you think you will still actually really be ignored? Because do you buy the argument that they can't respond to every single posting a letter online? Yeah.
Well, I've no doubt that they are not ignoring us per se. They're ignoring us in that they're not responding to the blogs. But does not mean that they're not reading the blogs. Because
I'm sure they are reading it.
Yes.
Can I come to Cheong? Mainstream media. All these changes and the recommendations that have been accepted, how do you see these affecting mainstream media? Can mainstream media continue to operate the same way? They have to change. If they have to change, in what way?
It is foolish of the mainstream media to ignore the discussion online, because people are going online for information. It's a major constituency, and it is important for the mainstream media not to be seen as being behind, as being out of the conversation. So in terms of coverage in the mainstream media of, for example, controversial issues, I think in their own interest, the mainstream media will have to attack those issues much more vigorously because of what is happening online.
Sure. Let's turn specifically to during election period, because now election candidates from both sides, opposition and government, can actually blog, vidcast, and all that. All those restrictions have been lifted. How will this impact the coverage by the mainstream media during elections?
I think it would it would lead to mainstream media being a lot more sensitive to what is being discussed online. Although I must add one caveat, that even in the course of our work in AIMS, the debate online took place, but frankly, the bulk of the substance, was really in the mainstream media. That is not to suggest that online, had not been helpful, but the bulk of the discussion took place in the mainstream media. So I think in the case when election takes place, I would imagine, I predict, that mainstream media will still be the primary platform for debate.
Gerald, do you agree with this point of view? But let me just also add on this question, and that is the issue about mainstream media and covering Singapore, the way it should be covered. Do you think that will change dramatically in the next few years?
Well, I think we are already seeing a bit of a change, but I think that the pace of change is not fast enough, and fortunately there is an online platform that a lot of citizens can go to. But I don't think in the long run this is the ideal situation from a...
What is the ideal situation?
I mean, I'm not a journalist, but I think the duty of journalists is to report factually what is going on, and not to report certain views only and block out other views because they're not favorable, not agreeable with the government or the elites.
Cheong, coming back to all the recommendations, that I'm sure there will be a view that, so what's the big deal, right? A lot of these changes that have been finally accepted are kind of forced. Let's take the films as I mean, I can produce a movie, I can put it on YouTube, and Singaporeans can watch.
True.
So you are actually lifting something which is a law which has already become archaic. So what has changed?
What has changed? I think technology is really forcing the pace of change. With YouTube, for example, there's no way that people who want to engage in political discourse, can ignore this technology. As you can see, in Malaysia and in the US. So technology will force that change. And secondly, I think domestic conditions. If you have got a hot button issue in Singapore, I think that is going to generate a tremendous amount of debate, both online and offline. So I would not say things have not changed, because technology is forcing the change.
So the political films liberalization, for instance, where we now have Richard Magnus, retired Judge Richard Magnus, will actually be heading this committee who will make a judgment on whether political films are objective and allowed. Do you think there'll be one day where we'll say that political films are okay, we will not have this committee required anymore? Will the government actually really go towards that?
I think it is possible. We believe that one day, with change of technology, YouTube was only invented 4 years ago. You don't know what other innovations are going to appear. And if local conditions change, the desire for greater political space is very strong in Singaporeans, and I expect it to get stronger. So when you have technology combined, with people's aspirations, I will not rule out, the possibility that law would eventually be repealed.
Well, Gerald, on that note,
I think there's an assumption among the government that if we allow such films, then because the people are sheep and they don't know how to tell left from right, therefore they will be totally misled by such things, which is not, I don't think it's true for Singaporeans. I think Singaporeans are much more educated nowadays, and especially those who are interested and engaged in the political process and actually listening to political speeches or something like that. They can discern what is the wheat from the chaff, and I think that's the direction I hope the government can go towards.
well, yes, let's hope that's the